People always ask how I balance my family life with 400 shows a year. I'm just doing what I love with the people I love. It's my magic life.
I like Wes Iseli. I like everything about him.
All right, everyone, we are back. And this week we have someone from across the pond. That's all I know from across. We'll find out where she's from. Everybody, it's Sophie Thwaites. What's happening? How are you?
Hi, I'm good, thank you. Lovely to be here.
Where are you from?
So the Midlands, so near, I guess, near Manchester. That's probably the most recognisable name. That'll do. But much more countrified.
I like countrified. I like country. So that I bet it's pretty. I bet it's really pretty there.
It is. We've got look out onto really nice fields. We're in a little a great place called the Peak District, which is just outside of Manchester. So yeah, very nice.
I was listening to a podcast from a couple of years ago, and they were saying that everyone in England's complaining about a heat wave. It was like 75, 78 degrees.
Oh my.
Is that really a heat wave for you guys?
I mean, yeah, if it gets to anything that makes people feel slightly uncomfortable, then yeah, we all have a little freak out over here. But no, I'm enjoying it.
We had no AC in our house for 3 weeks, and it was over 100. So
that was a heat wave. Yes, we were in a heat wave of 100 and something.
Okay, yeah. But you can deal with a bit more extreme over there.
I guess so. It's not fun to deal with it, but yeah, we deal with it.
Yeah, 70 is a good temperature for us. But anyway, all right, so for everyone listening, Sophie is I keep saying Stephanie, this is our third time doing it. Sorry, that's why I stumbled my words there. But Sophie is an occupational therapist. Tell me about occupational therapy. I was asking Natalie before the podcast. What is that again?
I made a good guess, but I'm not. I'm 90% sure I'm right. So take it, because I don't want to look like an idiot.
Well, it's always an interesting that, and to be honest, I rarely sort of market myself as an occupational therapist because it means something different to so many people. So some people have an occupational therapist that comes in and puts a wet room in designs a wet room for an elderly person in their house, or someone else might be helping someone to be discharged from hospital and making sure they've got the right equipment. But essentially, the overarching idea of it is just about how can you make someone more independent. So my side of it is that I work specifically with children and helping them improve their reading and writing and sitting still and concentrating, and all of that under the umbrella really comes into helping them be more independent without needing that extra support that they would otherwise need in school, for example.
So is this children with something wrong with them, or
ADHD?
Not wrong.
Regular
handicapped?
wiggles. Oh,
Say that again, sorry.
Handicapped, she said ADHD, wiggles. I mean, is it everything?
Yeah, so there are various different areas you can go to within occupational therapy. So yeah, some people absolutely are helping children who have disabilities and might be needing certain equipment in their house. And others, helping kids who have got the wiggles at school and can't quite keep themselves still when they're sitting on a chair, or really lack that concentration and focus in class, and perhaps they need lots of movement breaks, or provided equipment to help them write, for example, and be able to hold a pen or to be able to read. Now that is definitely an area under sort of paediatric occupational therapy. And I used to be in that area where I would sort of assign equipment and suggest certain equipment for children and go on little movement breaks in schools with the kids. But now I've very much niched down a slightly different avenue, which is still helping children with their reading and their writing and their concentration and their ability to sit still, but instead I'm doing very specific movement-based exercises, which is actually going back to their foundation level.
I taught magic in a school that were for troubled kids. They were kicked out of regular public school and had to go to this special school, government vehicles would drive them to this special school.
Oh yeah.
55 students and 45 counselors walked. A lot of the students had a private teacher, maybe an occupational therapist, but private person with them, and they would get rolly chairs, and that would help their core strength, but they would also get their wiggles out. For me as a teacher, that was distracting for me because the kid looked like he was just playing. So that's where I got, it messed me up, but it helped them. So
Help them concentrate.
yeah.
Yeah, but the challenge with those equipment sometimes is just like you said, it can be quite distracting for other people in the class and the teacher. But also sometimes with those the equipment like the ones you're talking about, they can be really great for that moment. But as soon as you take it away, actually the child is still really struggling, and you haven't actually got to the root of what's going on. And so they are, if you take that wiggly chair away, or you take the wiggly cushion away, then they're still really struggling with keeping still. So the work that I do is about going, okay, actually what's the underlying issue going on here? Let's get down to the root cause of it, and then sort of sort it out from there as like the foundation of a house, for example, rather than working on all these the walls and painting the walls and putting nice pictures on and sorting out up there. We've got to go right back to the foundation and sort out what's going on there, and then everything else starts to fall into place.
So who's reaching out to you to hire you? Is it parents? Is it schools? Is it hospitals?
Mostly just private parents. So I work privately. I used to work with within schools and things, but I found this niche of working. Well, the area called is working with retained primitive reflexes, and I felt that it was so powerful and such important work, and that I really needed to niche out and go off and do my own thing, because it's not, unfortunately, hugely known about within the National Health Service over here in England. So I needed to go off and create my own journey. So that's what I'm doing.
So primitive reflexes, I mean, we have children, and the doctor shows us little things when he's doing the checkup when they're 3 months and 4 months, and touching their hands and they grab around it, or something on their back.
Yeah, something on their back.
He squeezed their back and they would go towards it or whatever.
Oh yeah.
But yeah, tell me more about this. This is fascinating. That's why we had you on. I'm like, I've never heard of it.
So you've really touched on it, what it is there. So primitive reflexes essentially are a group of motor movements found in newborn babies. And these actually develop within utero, so during pregnancy. And some of them kick in during the birthing process, as they actually help a baby move down the birth canal. They also enable a baby to perform certain survival tasks like feeding and grasping, like you're mentioning, putting your finger in the baby's hand and they will automatically grasp around. And then it also enables a baby to learn how to lift their head up, to roll, to reach out, to crawl, to stand, and then eventually walk. Now, all of these become then automatic movements in the body. And the body then goes, okay, I know exactly what I'm doing, because I've gone through all that sort of checklist. I've gone through all those movements at the right time and the right order. And now those primitive reflexes have done their job, and they can lie dormant. They don't disappear completely in case later on in life you have an illness or a stroke, for example, where you have to relearn those basic movements again. And that's when these primitive reflexes kick in again and go, okay, I need to learn how to walk again, or I need to learn how to hold my knife and fork again. And they get this when these primitive reflexes kick in and go, okay, we're teaching the body how to move again. But if they still remain active and haven't gone through all of their jobs in exactly the right order and the right time, for example, perhaps it was a C-section, for example, or they really struggled, a baby really struggled feeding, or perhaps they didn't have very much tummy time for one reason or other, so they didn't really strengthen up their neck. Perhaps they were a bottom shuffler. No matter how much we tried to get them to crawl, they just would not crawl, and they just wanted to be a bottom shuffler. Or perhaps they just suddenly one day learned how to walk, and they were off running without necessarily going through all of those slower stages. If any of that happens, it can create these, ensure that these primitive reflexes actually remain active. And if they remain active, there's almost too much conversation then going on between the brain and the body, because the body is not then moving automatically. The brain is having to spend so much time telling the body how to move and how to how to, for example, write. So if a child is learning how to write and they have these primitive reflexes active within them still, instead of the body being able to automatically move cross that midline as well, the center of your body, eye tracking, moving nice and smoothly, moving from the left side of the page to the right nice and smoothly, getting all and enabling the brain to get all those great ideas out on paper that children have. They've got brilliant imaginations. Instead of the brain being able to work at that higher cognitive level, because the body is working automatically, the brain instead is having to spend so much time telling the body how to move and how to write that they can't possibly get those great ideas down. So often what you'd find with children that I work with, they go, yeah, they've got brilliant, the parents say they've got brilliant ideas. And if they're given a scribe or they're just telling us a story, they can come out with amazing stories. But when it actually comes to them putting a pen in their hand, they just really struggle and they can't write more than a few sentences. And even that is really quite illegible.
Wow. A lot of people would jump to, they just have ADHD. They can't concentrate to get it down on the page. But this is not that at all.
If my kid just got up and just started running around the house, I would think that was a great thing. I wouldn't think there's something, they're skipping a step.
We had a friend that had a baby the same time that we had our daughter, and they were very proud that she went from, she didn't have it wasn't bottom shuffling, but it wasn't crawling either. And she went then to walking. And they were like, yes. So I wonder, I mean, I don't know.
Yeah.
But I
mean, it's not black and white.
Right.
It doesn't mean that if a child is born by a C-section, for example, that they're automatically going to have these difficulties, or a child was a bum shuffler, you're definitely going to have these difficulties. It's not so black and white. But what I really consistently see is when I assess children and see if they've actually got these primitive reflexes active, because it's a really quick, simple assessment to ascertain if they are or not. Often when you then discuss the parents about the childhood and those first couple of years of life, there are some real, if they're having difficulties with their writing, for example, they might have had a lot of difficulties when they were a baby, and crawling perhaps might have been a difficulty, or especially with children who struggle to sit still, crawling would have probably been a really difficult one for them, or that perhaps they really struggle to feed, so and struggling with hand-eye coordination when they were a baby as well. So, and it has this knock-on effect. But I generally only work with children aged sort of 7+, because sometimes the body can sort of correct itself along the way, and they can perhaps do loads of movements, or they do gymnastics where they start to learn lots of movements again, and the body goes, oh yeah, this is what I was meant to be doing. Okay. But generally, if they've got these active primitive reflexes present and they are really struggling at school, then the likelihood is that there were definitely some difficulties in that first couple of years of life as well.
So I'll bring my 7-year-old to you. What are the tests that you run? Is it the same thing as the baby? Do you do that first, or what is it?
So there's 4 main tests that I'd always do as a quick initial assessment, because it's the 4 sort of biggest primitive reflexes, strongest ones. So one, for example, I would be testing one of them called the ATNR, the asymmetrical tonic neck reflex. And for this one, I ask a child to, and I do this online often, and the parents act as my hands, or I do it in person, where a child would sort of be standing up with their feet slightly apart and their arms outstretched at sort of like a zombie, as it were, sort of zombie arms. And then the adult behind, because I'm often giving instructions with it being online, would be moving the head. The child is just instructed to stay in that position with your arms out in front, and just you focus on what you're doing, and the adult will focus on what they're doing. The adult is behind, moving the head from one side, letting go, pausing, and then we'll bring it back to the center, letting go, pausing, and then we'll move it to the opposite side. Now, what another important instruction is telling the child, make sure that you let your adult move your head and you don't do it for them. And for this one, it's a really quick, easy one to see, because often with so many children that I see, as soon as the adult moves the head to one side, the arms fully move over as well.
Oh.
So sometimes completely all the way around, and then perhaps when they come back, it might overcompensate and carry on. So there's too much connection going on between the head and the neck and the upper part of the body still. So rather than it being isolated movements, that there is just too much connection, and which could really affect, for example, writing. So if a child is writing, as soon as they start wanting to go over here, their head will start turning as well. So rather than being able to just the hand being able to move across that midline independently from the head, if that makes sense.
Wow. Yes.
No, yes.
That's very interesting.
So is there some that just move a little bit when you move their head, or is that okay? Or is it?
So generally, and I have seen, and again, you know, sometimes I've seen parents that have come with characteristics that there might be something there, and we've tested, and there's no movement at all. So there's something else going on, and it's not necessarily this avenue of the primitive reflexes. But yeah, if there's movements going on, I generally score them from a 0 to a 4. 4 being there's something really quite strong there, and that's often when the arms are moving right the way to the side. Or 1 being, yeah, there's a little bit of movement, it's not a huge amount. But often when you've got with one primitive reflex, you might be scoring higher in some of the others, and that's ultimately why a parent has come to me, because there's something that they know they need support with.
I totally want you to move my head around, but now I know.
We're gonna have it there later.
Yeah, I want to know what I do. I mean, but now I know, so I'd fight it maybe. Yeah.
I don't know. Can you fight it if you know that you're not supposed to move your arms? Or automatic?
I think you'd notice. So it's harder to it's sometimes harder to see on adults, because we overcompensate a lot, and we have found structures that help us with areas that we struggle with. So we might be a bit stiffer. So it's sometimes a little bit harder, and I often see this actually also with children who do a lot of dance or ballet. Their bodies have been sort of trained to be in a certain position, but it sort of takes a bit of a fine eye, I guess, to see, you know what, let's do this 2 or 3 more times, and it's going to start creeping out.
All right, there you go.
So yeah, if you do it a few times, do it 3 or 4 times, and yeah, you'll have to let me know how you get on. See
So I have a couple friends, one in particular that recently had a stroke. Would they start doing the zombie thing? Would they start moving as well because they've had a stroke? They have to reset it?
It's a good question, and I don't know the answer to that. I'm not sure about testing it on people who've had a stroke, for example, but I do know that there are studies where people have worked on primitive reflexes and provided certain exercises with people who have had a stroke, and they've been really helpful to get their bodies moving again. So rather than, I think with someone who's had a stroke, it's less likely that you test them to see if these reflexes are active. You just probably go straight in with the therapeutic exercises and help them from there.
So what age range do? You said 7 to what is really a good range to see, since adults are a little bit more.
I mean, I typically and sort of market myself working with kids between the age of sort of 8 to 12.
Okay.
But that is, well, for a few reasons. I love that age of kids. If we're able to work with them at that age where they've had a sort of 2 or 3 years at school by then, they're still struggling, perhaps they're still sort of, and the gaps between them and their peers are getting wider, then it's like, okay, great, let's start intervening. And the changes that we can see can be really amazing before they then jump up into going to secondary school, where there are so many more demands on them and less support. So I love marketing to that age, because if we can support them then, when actually they're often in smaller schools, a bit more supported. Parents have more time. They're not wanting to disappear off to go and see their friends when they become teenagers. So there's and often also at that age, they're a little bit more accepting to parents saying, this is what we're doing now, rather than then teenagers going, no, that's not
Right.
on my agenda. However, having said that, I've worked with teenagers. I work with a couple right now, and in fact, I'm also working with an adult at the moment. So, you know, it can vary. It's basically from 7 plus all the way up to adulthood as well.
Okay. Interesting. Cool.
So you had the zombie test. What are the tests? Are you? I don't want you to give away all your secrets, but I mean, what other? I don't know. Can
Yeah, no, I'm happy to
Okay.
give these away. So another one might be the STNR, for example. That's testing the symmetrical tonic neck reflex. Now this one would be they're down on all fours, like a sort of a tabletop. And what we want them to be doing is the child just lifting their head up, so they're trying to sort of look towards the top of the wall, and then pausing there for a few seconds, and then coming all the way back down, so they're looking at their knees, and then again pausing there for a few seconds. Now, as they're doing this movement, I'd be giving them the instruction of, imagine we put a glass of water on your back, and you've got to try and keep as still as possible whilst it's just your head moving up and down. And what so often see in kids that I see is that actually, as they, even with that instruction of, imagine you've got a glass of water on your back, as their head moves up and down, their back really arch, sometimes their bottom is wiggling all over the place, their legs are sometimes sort of flailing around at the back, arms can be really shaking in that position, even when only being asked to do it for 2 or 3 times, and their body's really fatiguing. And when this one is active, this is often one where kids are also displaying lack of struggling to concentrate, really wiggly bottoms at school as well, struggling to sit still, can affect your swimming as well. You know, some children, when they've been, even though they've done lots and lots of swimming, and perhaps they've even had to go down sort of one-to-one lessons as well because they're really struggling, it could well actually be to do with some of these primitive reflexes. And by deactivating them and integrating these primitive reflexes back into the body, things like swimming just suddenly start improving. And they're suddenly sit still in class as well.
So what is your first step when you see somebody that has it?
So people normally see me on a one-to-one, and they come on for roughly about a 10 to 12 month program, because what we're doing essentially is we're going back to that first couple of years of life. We're going back to that foundation level. So it's not about a quick fix and just coming on just for a few months and then or a few weeks rather, and then we're done. We would have an initial session and we would have sessions every 4 to 6 weeks where I would be assigning them anywhere between sort of 3 and 5 exercises that then they go home and practice every day with their parents, with adult supervision as well, just to make sure they're not trying to fly through them or not sort of introducing little habits that we don't want for the exercises. And they are the movements, not that the children would necessarily recognize it as this, but the adults can see it as what we're almost doing is mirroring those movements carried out as babies. So, for example, some of those early movements would be going from a fetal position, for example, from during utero within the womb, and then opening all the way back out again to that sort of startle reflex, which we often remember from when our kids were babies, and you'd put them down, you just got them nicely settled, and then they'd flail their arms out, and oh great, we were back to square one, and they're wide awake again.
Yeah.
So
we know that one.
Yeah.
And so we do exercises like that where you're really going back to those really, really basic foundation movements again. And they carry those out every day for the next 4 to 6 weeks, and we review it, and we adapt it or we change it, and we keep moving through all those movements. And then eventually by the end, we'll do movements like we're actually crawling, and we're actually starting to roll around on the floor, but really slowly and controlled. And for some children, like rolling and moving their arms across their body so that then they're turning onto their front from their back, they really struggle with initially.
Wow.
And it's because they haven't done those movements when they were younger, so they're not automatic movements in their bodies.
And that just shifts something in the brain and
It just activates the reflex.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Yeah.
Very cool.
How did you stumble upon this? What is it called? The reflex, the primitive reflex. How did you stumble upon that? Was that something that every occupational therapist knows?
No, not at all. No. So I actually went through this same program when I was 16. So when I was 16, I was diagnosed with dyslexia and dyspraxia, and at the school I was at, someone had just recently trained in working with retained primitive reflexes, and so I had the program used on me, and I did all these exercises, and the changes in me in that year were pretty significant. Not only did my concentration improve, my ability to actually retain information from one week to the next, because this is where it had initially been flagged up. My French teacher could not understand why I couldn't remember from one week to the next certain spellings it was mostly about. And my writing and just getting those ideas on paper were really difficult for me, and they massively improved. But I think the biggest thing for me was my confidence. So within that year, I went from being a really quite a shy girl to being much more confident person, and actually going away traveling on my own for 6 months at 18, where I would never have done that. Prior to that, I was very much a home bird and wanted to be around my parents a lot more. So, and this is what I really consistently see so much with the kids that I work with, the changes in their confidence and how grounded they are in themselves massively improves. And the parents really talk about the dramatic improvements in how they can feel quite shy within themselves and not really wanting to talk to their peers, or even, and definitely not performing on stage, and then suddenly by the end of the program they're getting up on stage at school and performing and having friendship groups now. And the changes are, it's not just about the academic changes, it's about actually how they are within themselves, and that confidence, and how grounded they are.
Oh,
that's amazing that reflexes has anything to do with confidence.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, you can see it where if you're flagging somewhere in your academics and you just feel that takes away your confidence. Maybe not for you, because you didn't care. You're a different story. People actually care about how
I'm just saying reflexes and confidence.
But I think it's a bit of both. It's not only just about the fact that, okay, I'm not struggling quite so much and I'm not behind my peers anymore. That is, I think, part of it. But it's also part of just the body understands what it's doing now. Because the body then is working in a much more automatic state, the brain now can go, oh, now I can start figuring out what's going on in my environment around me. Now I have better body awareness. I'm not bumping into my friends anymore. So now they're wanting to talk to me a bit more. And suddenly now I'm understanding my eye tracking has improved. So my peripheral vision has improved as well. So now people aren't just creeping up on me and then I'm shouting out because they're scared. They've scared me. And these things, when you're kids, you can lose friends over things like that, unfortunately. And so if things like that are improved, then suddenly your friendship groups improve, and then your confidence improves. And just a lot of parents talk to me how their children just seem so much more grounded within themselves.
Body awareness is a thing people don't talk about, but I have a friend that I took her shopping, and I mean, she just stopped in the middle of an aisle with a shopping cart several times, and just building up people behind her, just was not aware of anything but what she had in her mind. And it's like, something's off there. Like, I can see why if you did that in school, it would just be odd. That's an odd duck. That's weird.
Yeah, or standing too close to people in a line waiting for lunch, you'd be like, back off.
Yeah.
What are you doing?
Body awareness. Yeah.
Right, yeah.
I kept pulling that girl back. It was publicist.
Yeah.
What is, you said dyslexia and dyspraxia. I've never heard of it. What is that? Heard of that?
So dyspraxia is more to do with your body awareness, and how your body's moving into the hand-eye coordination. A lot of fatigue can come into it as well because you're working extra hard and trying to navigate your environment. This is how certainly it used to. Well, I haven't got rid of my dyslexia; it's still part of me. But these were definitely areas that I used to struggle with, and there's to an element I definitely do still struggle with certain definitely hand-eye coordination. My husband tries to throw a ball to me, and I can't catch at all. Hopefully, our children will inherit his ability to throw and catch instead.
All right, there you go. There you go.
Did it help with the dyslexia at all, or is that just something that's totally separate?
So that's a really interesting question, and a lot of people sometimes ask me sort of what's the difference between a sort of diagnosis like dyslexia or dyspraxia or ADHD and these primitive reflexes. And there are similarities and differences. So a lot of traits between them and characteristics can be really similar. So for example, ADHD. So a characteristic of ADHD might be that a child is really struggling to sit still and concentrate. Now, they are also characteristics of active primitive reflexes, such as the spinal gland and the STNR, the symmetrical tonic neck reflex. So if actually, when a child comes to me, whether they've got a diagnosis or not, it doesn't matter for me. But if they come to me and we assess them and actually it comes out they've got these primitive reflexes really very active within them, once we start working on those, often, not always, but often those traits that they've been diagnosed with for their ADHD also start reducing. Because actually, perhaps they weren't part of that ADHD, they were actually more to do with these primitive reflexes. And I have worked with kids in the past who've actually been able to come off their medication for ADHD because it was actually to do with these primitive reflexes and they've almost been misdiagnosed.
So over where you are, is it as crazy? They just give ADHD medicine to everybody here in the States, it seems like. If a kid's wiggling in a chair, the first thing they just throw medicine at it and then maybe get them an exercise ball to balance on. Also,
it's not quite automatic. It's I think it is something that is discussed earlier on with parents, but a lot of parents that I certainly come into contact with and speak to are wanting to find another alternative. And a lot of the time in our conversation, we're like, we've been down the route and we've talked to our GP doctors about medication, but we're trying to hold off. Maybe there's another avenue we can look at. And I go, okay, great. Well, let's explore this, shall we, and see if it's something worth having a look at, and then at least after that they'll be on a better platform to know whether, okay, that helped to a degree but we still need some support, or actually their ability to concentrate and ability to sit still has improved so much that actually, yeah, okay, it's not a magic wand and it doesn't get rid of all their difficulties, but it's reduced it to such a degree that it's manageable now and it's okay. And we can help the child with certain tools now that we don't need to have that medication as well.
I mean, if this 15% or 30% cured all the kids on ADHD, it would be amazing.
Yeah.
Wow.
That'd be huge.
So, reading, writing, concentration, that's all because of the midline. Concentration is
reading. Yeah, reading and writing have a lot to do with being able to cross that midline. Reading also needs, especially also concentration reading. For example, if you're reading from the classroom board, for example, and then having to look down your paper and write it down, and that's concentration, that's reading, and then that's writing, and it's retain that information. Some kids, that is just so overwhelming, because to look at what's going on the board, for example, they're taking that information and going, okay, all right, I know what I'm doing now. By the time they then put their head down, they're gone, well, I can't remember what was on the board now, because the brain has spent so much time telling the body how to then move the head back down that it's gone, well, I can't remember what was on the board now. So now I've got to look back up. And you see this when I used to work in schools, that some children just be like one sort of letter at a time because they just can't retain that information and then be able to move their head at the same time. So their brain is just not working at that high cognitive level.
There's an old thing I remember I heard when I was younger, that when you enter a room, if you went to go get something, like I have a work shed out in the backyard, I'll go get a screwdriver. I'll open up the door and I'll see other stuff and I forget I need the screwdriver. They say because you go through that door, because you had it the whole time and then you open it up and all these things you see.
Yeah.
So they are seeing that and then they're going through all these different things. Okay, put my head down, open your eyes, pick up your pencil. They're going through a door mentally. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And then their brains, and throughout all of that as well, sometimes they're also trying to tell their body how on earth they're meant to be sitting down on that chair without wiggling around, and then getting told off by the teacher perhaps. And they've got so many other things. And then it's not surprising that at the end of the day, they're completely fatigued.
Yeah.
They're exhausted, and then they have perhaps emotional outbursts at home as well. And the parents are then really struggling with that. So, it can have this incredible knock-on effect, that just these challenges that a child's having at school then comes home and does ripple out to the rest of the family as well. No fault of their own. It just happens that way because then they're coming in and they are exhausted. They're having an emotional outburst. And then perhaps the parents are also quite tired, so then they are responding perhaps negatively as well, and then it can all escalate, and then it's a lot on the whole family. And some families I talk to, how it's just made just life so much easier. In fact, I was just talking to someone recently, and it can even affect things like travel sickness. So the families used to really struggle going on journeys even more than sort of half an hour or an hour, because one of the children used to get really sick in the car. And now they're traveling all the way to, well, a place in England called Cornwall, which is sort of an 8-hour drive, and absolutely fine. And now he feels fine within himself, so he's actually falling asleep in the car. And they said it's just been amazing.
Wow.
He's not sick all the time, and now he's just sleeping, and he's so much more comfortable in the car that they've expanded their travel in the country as well, because he's no longer getting travel sick.
Here, for me, it's hypothetical children, and I'm feeling bad for them. They're exhausted and they're bursting out at home. They're fatigued. They're travel sickness. It's just wow that you're able to do this and help these people. That is awesome.
Yeah.
That is so cool.
It is so exciting. When you hear, I mean, the changes you see differ in every child, because we're all independent and we're all individual. But what I really do so often see is, in parents, by the end of the year, we reflect back, because a year's a long time, and we reflect back and we look at what came up in our initial consultation. We're like, how's the sleeping now? Oh my gosh, yeah. God, do you remember how bad it was? They were waking up all the time, because sleeping improves as well so often. And do you remember how shy they used to be and how they didn't have any friends? And now they've got a really nice group of friends and they're going out because they're no longer scared about being in public spaces, and they're okay about having people over now. Oh yeah, and do you remember they used to have a scribe because they really struggled to get their ideas on paper? Oh yeah, and now they're actually at the same level as all their peers in class with their reading, and they've just jumped up loads of levels in that year with their reading. So it's we always have a bit of a reflection, and it's really exciting to see. And it makes my job brilliant.
That is awesome. That's probably you probably look forward to that year in a review.
Yeah.
Golly, that is awesome.
That's great. That's gotta feel good.
The emotions and the outburst and the fatigue. It's stressful enough being a kid.
Right.
You don't think about it. You're like,
Yeah.
man, I wish I could be 7 again. But being sent away from mom and dad, having to experience the world alone, pretty much in school, and then going through all this stuff alone, and then coming home exhausted just because of that.
Right.
I mean, some kids get on brilliant at school, and that's so great. But for some kids, school is just, it's such a difficult, daunting place, and so loud, and there's so much going on. There's far too much stimulation. There's too many people. They don't know how to move around because perhaps they're struggling with their body awareness. The teachers are going at 1,000,000 miles an hour and they can't keep up. by the time they've just started understanding one thing, the teacher's on the fourth or fifth thing by then. And yeah, it can be so overwhelming for some children. And so if we can just make it a bit easier for them, and like what we were talking about, what is occupational therapy at the beginning as well, if we can try and make their life just a bit more independent and easier for them and help them thrive, then and help them reach their potential and be who they want to be, then that's a good day's work.
I mean, that's our jobs as parents, is just to make them the best they can be. And you want to take all that away from them. You want them to sleep good. You want them to have friends. You want them to be independent. And you're giving that to them. Golly, that's awesome, girl.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, it's cool. It's amazing because it's funny because when I said I used to do this primitive. Well, I went through the program when I was younger, and then I worked with various children over the years in various different settings, and then I studied psychology and then studied occupational therapy, and was still working within various occupational therapy settings. And I just thought, just none of this is getting to the root cause of it. And I don't know what to do. I don't feel like giving them writing utensils and wobble boards is enough for me. And I couldn't figure out what to do. And actually, it was my mum and dad that said, "Well, what was that thing that you had when you were a teenager?" And I'd completely forgotten it. And I sort of feel like I've done a complete circle, a complete 360, because I completely just forgot about it for years. Because you often do. I was 16. I was really young, so it was only sort of almost, not quite, but probably 25 years, 30 years. 15, 20 years later, that suddenly, I looked into it again and was like, oh yeah, that's the thing. Because then when I work with people, I come from a complete, personal and professional experience and knowledge, and I can go, well, I found it amazing, and I've seen kids that I find it amazing on as well.
So did you have to go back for training for this additional training, or was it already in your occupational therapy?
Yeah, no, it's not, unfortunately.
No. Okay.
But also, I think because occupational therapy is so broad, we just touch on so many different areas within the course. And then really what it's about is, like a lot of courses, it's about then once you leave the uni, once you leave that course, then you go and specialise and go and work and go and hone in on the area that you want to. But it's not even touched on these primitive reflexes, unfortunately. But in order to learn about, where it was I studied anyway in the UK, to do these primitive reflexes, in order to even be accepted on the course, you had to be an occupational therapist or a physio or a teacher or a nurse or a doctor, someone with that basic understanding of the body and children and the brain, and have that basic knowledge at least to be able to build on.
So in talking to have you talked to your parents? Did you have issues when you were a baby? Did you go right to running?
I was the third child, so my parents can't remember much now.
Yeah.
But they do say, I have asked that question a few years ago, and they said they remember at the time, sort of when having those questions with the lady who taught me the exercises, that when they asked, there were some difficulties, and because being the younger child as well, they felt that putting me in I had two older children, so they were constantly carting me around in a car seat a lot. And my mum said she held quite a bit of, I guess, responsibility for that, and she's sorry that she carted me around. She's like, maybe that contributed to it. And I was like, look, please don't hold any blame. You've got to do what you've got to do when you're a kid. Sorry, when you're a parent. But my mum sometimes feels that, sort of moving me around a lot when I was a kid, and rather than being able to just run around, instead I was driving around in a car. But I said, look, the amount I was driving around in a car, and then linked and then correlated to the amount that actually I was free around the garden and running around, and it doesn't match up. And I was like, so it's not that, don't worry. but yeah, so I think there were some difficulties, but my parents are a little bit vague on exactly what those are at the moment.
Okay, so we have identical 4-year-old twins. I feel that our babysitter, it was just easy to wrangle a set of twins at a magic show, throw them in the double stroller, right?
Oh yeah,
So
yeah.
I'm wondering what I need to do to test my children to see if, I mean, I think they're okay.
Yeah, I think they're all right. They have plenty of time running around. And we eventually had to get on her and be like, let them out. So
Yeah, yeah.
but yeah.
It's easy.
They've still got time. Yeah.
And they go in different directions.
Yeah.
Yeah. But like I said, these things can affect one child and not another as well. So it's not like one size fits all. But what so often, unfortunately, what we seem to be in a society now is that actually kids are contained so much more, or they are put in front of a screen so much more, and they're not getting that movement that they used to get as much, and that they need. So even babies, you see babies so much in well, not so much, but I have seen babies in strollers in the past where they've just given an iPad, for example, and they're watching their tablet or their iPad like in the buggy. So they're not actually they're not training their eyes. They're not learning about the environment. They're not learning how to cross that midline. They're not learning that short-sighted and long-sighted, and these are all really important things to learn. Or parents take their babies out from the car and put them straight into a stroller still in the car seat, and then leave them in there for ages. That actually can be really detrimental. You need to lie them down so that then they're nice and flat, actually, so that then they can still move around. Their head can move and their arms can move, and they can move around. So there are and these like bumbo seats. I don't know if you've come across those.
Mm-hmm.
Fine, using them every now and again, but again, some families have used them a lot, and then the children are actually learning to sit up actually when they're not quite ready, and so they're almost skipping stages then, because they're developing muscles and the way how to move in their sort of sitting bones before they're quite ready. So there are things that our society isn't helping, I don't think. And you can bring in things like nutrition and equipment and screen time. They're not helping. But then also a lot of parents really struggle because we always have to work a bit more than we used to. So perhaps we're having to move around a bit more, and we have a lifestyle a bit more than where we are in cars, having to go to one place and go to the other in our busy lives. So they can be a factor, but also in all my consultations I have with parents, I will say these are factors, but I don't want anyone to ever hold any blame upon themselves, because we're all just doing our very best as parents, aren't we?
Oh yeah. Yeah.
So have you reached out to your teacher since you started doing this? Do you keep in touch with her? Do you remember your teacher from when you were 16? Is she still?
I tried to, but I couldn't get hold of her. No, I couldn't find her. She'd retired, and I tried a few times to find her and locate her, but no, I couldn't do it.
Oh shoot, that would have been cool. I bet she would have thought it was neat that you ended up doing. Yeah.
So when we first logged on, you had mentioned an ebook. Can you tell me about your ebook?
Yeah, so I recently created an e-booklet called Fidget to Focus, and it's got 10 simple exercises in there with they're not to do with necessarily the exercises that I do on my sessions with my one-to-one clients. They're very specific and got a very specific sequence. However, they are quite fun exercises that people can try at home with their kids, or even teachers can use. And they're just nice, fun ones that get the bodies moving again, or trying to help develop fine motor skills and gross motor skills. And there's some balancing activities, and there's just some nice little simple exercises that parents can download and access and they can have a little go at them at home with their kids. So yeah, I wanted to gift that out to anyone that was interested, and hopefully we'll put the information in the footnotes.
Absolutely. You know what? We've done an hour. Can you believe it?
Oh, wow.
That was so quick. You are awesome. I love what you're doing. You know, my wife is going back to college right now to be a nutritionist.
Oh, amazing.
Well, see, I have magic, so I have people clapping for me and tell me I'm great. But I'm passionate about magic. She helped people lose weight, and she gets those success stories. I'm not saying it's a paycheck, but it's pretty damn close.
It's yeah.
I mean, you hear
awesome.
these success stories, and I'm living through you and these success stories I'm hearing about these children. I'm like, that is awesome. Just, you're winning.
It's a drive, just like, you know, your experience then with these success stories, and then when you work with people and you're like, yes. You know, it feels so good, doesn't it?
Yeah.
So just like that, but nutrition's a little different because it is an addiction. So people will tell her that they're doing the, I don't know what's happening. I'm doing everything right, and then okay, I was eating this and this and this, and I wasn't telling you. Have you had people not do the exercises, or do the parents really help because of the age? The parents are helping them do their homework.
Yeah, a few things. I think generally because parents they've invested in it. It's not something they've got free from the NHS, from the National Health Service. So they're investing their time and money into it as well. So they are going to get their kids to move. This is sometimes the challenge when I've worked with teenagers, and the teenagers go, no, you're not doing it with me. I'm doing it by myself. And that's when we just don't see the results. And I can see it from the sessions, and I go, yeah, you're not doing it. Because I can see, because we're not seeing the progress. Because we're ready to move on to the next exercises when they've cracked it, and when they're doing that exercise the way that's designed. It's like, great, you're doing it now, let's move on. And if I'm not seeing it, I can go, look, let's have a chat. What's going on? Do we need to reduce the number of exercises? Do we need to reduce the repetitions so that then it becomes more accessible to them? So yeah, we always often work with them. We'll look at getting little charts and things, but often the parents are generally honest. Yeah. So I think that's also the benefit of working with younger kids as well, is that the parents get
awesome.
on it.
That's awesome. How about a website, Twitter, Facebook, anything you can mention to everyone?
Yeah, no. So I've got my Facebook, which is Sophie Thwaites. I'm gonna get this wrong now. I think it's Helping Your Child Learn. Maybe we'll add that to the footnotes as well.
Send the link and I'll add it there. I'll put you on
and then I've definitely got a website as well, which has got a little bit about what I do. But to be honest, it doesn't have a huge amount, just because it depends on the individual who's calling me as well. And we talk about how it is that I can help that individual child. I work with people all over the world. In fact, I'm working with a few people in America at the moment as well, because it's online, so it's easy and it's so much more accessible to all over the world now. But yeah, I'll give you my email and my website and Instagram and Facebook details.
Awesome. Perfect. Girl, you are awesome. Time flew by. Thank you for doing it. Our schedule is crazy right now. Thanks for working with us. Thanks for doing this. And only thing we have left to say is see you next week.
Thanks. Bye.
Check us out online at wesiseli.com and patreon.com/Wes_Iseli for behind-the-scenes videos, blooper videos, never-before-seen footage, discounts on merchandise, magic trick tutorials, and more. That's Wes Iseli, spelled WESISELI.